So hello, I'm Claire.
Hello.
And I am the subject coordinator for the Combined Honours Business Management Programme, and I teach a year-long compulsory module that my students take, and I also teach them in second year. So I kind of have a handle in quite a lot of the employability stuff that runs through the programme. So I want to talk to you about this, here are my examples at the front, this project that we put together a couple of years ago. We've run it twice now, which I've called Fantastical Creatures with an entertaining pink font, just to try and avoid death by Arial. I'm afraid I was in a meeting before, so I've forgotten my clicker. I'm going to have to stand here and do this. So I wanted to outline basically what we did and how it's been going and the student and staff perspectives on all of that, and to give you a slight opportunity to kind of get involved and try it out for yourself. I'm afraid I didn't bring any plasticine or art materials, but to a certain extent it is interactive. So here's my first question. How would you do if I asked you to define your personal brand? This is what Jeff Bezos famously said, it's what people say about you when you're not in the room. So, traditionally we've talked to students, when we talk about employability stuff, we talk about your strengths and weaknesses and how you're going to address areas of weakness and how you're going to articulate your strengths and your skills, but also values come into this. And as I was just saying before we started, what we bring into this on the Combined Honours programme is to really have the students focus from an early stage in their degree on seeing being a Combined Honours student as an advantage. So, we know that Combined Honours students can feel a bit lost. They can feel almost like they have a dual identity because they are both one thing and another. So that sense of belonging can be really difficult to manage. And what we've found with our experience on the Combined Honours programme in the business school is that actually the students do really well on it. They get good outcomes, that we get good satisfaction scores. And I think it's because there's a certain amount of positive reinforcement where we are reassuring them that we understand their experience, and that's how we've designed the course, but we're also reassuring them that being a Combined Honours student is a good thing. That kind of agility and resilience that they get by managing across two disciplines actually is one of those things that employers are kind of interested in, so it's all good. So, I'm not going to ask you to do this, but how do you think you'd do? Because this is kind of where we started with the students, was to have them write something. Could you write an overview of your skills or your attributes or your capabilities? And the problem that we had, and this was really the problem we were trying to solve, was we would get this kind of thing. Team player, everyone's a team player. Focused, I'm ambitious, committed, my hobbies are reading, socialising and going to the movies. Or worse, mainly it's just drinking, I think, for some of them. So we were getting these very kind of bland statements from students. When we started to have them think about, what would your CV look like and what would that kind of little top paragraph be, what's your statement? That they weren't really tapping into what was really going on with them. So we wanted to try and come up with a framework, and I guess what we had on the previous slide is kind of a framework for how to design a personal brand. But my colleague, Barry O'Donovan, who used to run the module with me, we were at a conference a couple of years ago, and she went to a talk by an anthropologist, actually, who was talking about this creativity project that he'd used in a very different way in his course. But kind of over coffee, it was one of those great kind of conference moments where over coffee we suddenly had this kind of eureka moment and thought, wow, maybe we could use that to address employability, and could that work, and could that really kind of push the students forward? So this is the kind of stuff that we do in class. So this is how we try and this is why they're branded differently, because this is direct from week 10 of the first semester. So where this is happening is at the point that the students have handed in their big first semester assignment. It comes in week 10. We design it deliberately like that so that it dovetails with some of the stuff they're doing on other modules. But the downside was it meant we had 2 weeks to kind of play with, where if we weren't careful, the students just wouldn't come to class if they didn't perceive that as being useful. So we've slotted the employability stuff in there, and this is the first of 2 weeks on this project. So we talk a bit about, this is a bit of theory from kind of operations management, or the idea of order qualifiers, order winners. To be in the room if you're selling something, in this case yourself, there are kind of threshold standards. So, if you're running a cafe, there are things that you have to do just to be able to kind of function and to be in the competition. But of course, order winners are where you want to have distinctiveness. So what's your USP? How do you stand out from your competitors? So it works quite well for our business students to kind of link them back to something they'd done about 4 weeks previously and say, well, remember that thing that was about business? We can now apply it to you as individuals. We talk a bit about personal brand. We've got a few quotes about what branding really means. I suppose, traditionally it's about organisations and, how we brand a company or a set of products. But this is the key one, that, you know, it's not about whether you have a personal brand or not. Everyone does. It's really about managing it, because you are being perceived. So you may or may not be asked to articulate, you know, okay, tell me about you, and you've got 90 seconds before we move on to the next question. But we've all got a personal brand, so we might want to think about how we manage that. We talk a bit about what employers are looking for, so we've got various, you know, those lists. I quite like this one because it moves on from the traditional kind of stuff that we normally see in transferable skills on our module descriptions. So independent thinking, being proactive, goal orientation. What's nice about this is we can start talking about how many of these are skills, how many of them are attitudes, and how do you even teach that stuff, and how many of them might you call kind of attributes. So we're not just thinking about what can you do, but who are you? And some of this even comes down to your personal values. So are you somebody who's goal-oriented? And if you're not, is that okay? Would you just emphasise other strengths? There's a whole piece here about, in a sense, having the students do a kind of self-audit against who they think they are, but also what we know employers are looking for, because it gives them that framework. This one's a bit older. It's from a careers publication. I like this one because it speaks, I think, a lot to the combined honours identity in terms of the adaptability, flexibility agenda, which is what we hear a lot when we actually talk to employers, whether they're placement employers or they're coming in looking to talk about grad schemes, is that this is what they really like about the combined honours students. So it enables me to kind of push that a bit, but really it's just another kind of framework for the students to start thinking about this stuff. I show them this, which I really like. This is about how satisfied employers are with the kind of thing that they get from graduates. I love the fact that languages are down here because I'm a linguist, so if you speak languages, this is how you stand out, because you can see that only 3% of employers are satisfied with what they're getting from graduates. Whereas if you're good at IT, well, so's everybody else. So don't even go there, you know. And I think this kind of, if we're thinking about how do I fit against the competition, and it's tough to talk to first years about this because, you know, they're kind of quite new and they're not really hitting grad schemes yet. But they're going to be applying for jobs in the holidays, and they're definitely looking for internships and things like that in the summer. And we hope they're starting to think already about maybe having a placement year in year 3. So this kind of thing's quite neat, because then it kind of helps you to kind of position yourself, in a sense, against what everyone else has got going on. This is all from this module session. This is the bit where we talk about the benefit of combined honours in terms of the specific kind of attributes and skills that they're developing along the way. And various colleagues have done quite a lot of work in the business school, have done quite a lot of work on the kind of combined honours student experience, if you like, so we can back that up. And then we do this exercise where we have the students answer these questions. And this went pretty badly, to be honest. They weren't really very good at this stuff. And maybe they just weren't engaged, but I think mainly they just didn't quite know how to tackle it. And it was partly because they kind of think they get this stuff, but it was also just that this was quite a new kind of process for them to deal with. What really worked was this one. How do you think a friend would describe you? And the first time I ran this was the bit that got them all talking. And some of them got their phones out and started texting their mates. I'm not being funny, but I mean, guys, how would you describe me? I thought, this is really interesting. You know that thing on the telly where they do that text to all, and they grab, I think, is it Jimmy Carr? And somebody on stage, and he grabs someone's phone. Who is it?
Michael McIntyre.
That's it, Michael McIntyre. And, you know, so you can text, like, so I said, well, okay, here's the thing. Everyone get your phone out and text a whole bunch of people and ask them to describe you in 3 words. But before you do that, describe yourself in 3 words, and then look at how it's different. So what you get back from the people that you're doing netball with every Wednesday will be one thing. The stuff you get back from the people you know through your halls is something else. And then you've got what your mum and dad say about you. And then you've got what your kind of friends from high school. And you've got this kind of big, complicated Venn diagram where over all of that you can see hopefully some commonalities. But crucially, how you're being perceived by all these different kind of groups is a bit different. Overall, it definitely helped them to move forward with this whole process of really understanding. I don't want them to just take what other people say about them as true, but quite a lot of them could start to engage with, okay, that's really interesting. I had no idea that's how I was perceived. So we kind of do all this process, and then we kind of introduce the creativity thing, which is this. So what we do in the first seminar is we do all of this work about employability, about the kind of agenda, about where we're going with this thing, about what we really want them to think about is their personal brand. And then I explain that it's got 3 parts. So what we want as the it's a course requirement, so it's compulsory, but it's not graded, is they have to write a personal brand statement. That's their aim, that's their main output. They bring it to class, but to get there, they create an alabrichi, and these are examples, and I'll explain what alabrichis are, but it's this idea of a fantastical creature, based on your skills, your attributes, your values, and all that stuff. You have to write me a text explaining the design. So if it's got big ears, because you're a really good listener, I want you to write that down for me. If you've chosen particular colours or a particular kind of design, just kind of explain where you're going with this thing. So this really happened in one piece. They would submit a photograph of what they've made with their kind of explanation for the design, and then they would bring their personal brand statement to class. And I took those in and I marked them and kind of gave them some comments and, said well done. So, how this goes down, by this point, towards the end of the first semester when they've had me every week, I think we just about get away with this. I think if I'd introduced this, can't talk about this at open days because all the parents throw their arms in the air. And there's always at least one student who complains about playing with plasticine in the classroom. Probably wasn't listening when I explained why it's a good idea. But how this goes down, I think in week 10, by that point we've gained their trust, and that's really important. I wouldn't do this with students further on in the degree where time is crucial, and I definitely wouldn't do it too much earlier with the first years because it doesn't quite feel like what you come to university for. And of course, once we'd done it the first time, we had examples we could show them, we could really kind of demonstrate the value, and we had the student feedback to kind of back it up. So, an alabrichi, sorry, I don't actually speak Spanish, is this kind of thing. Brightly coloured folk art sculptures, fantastical creatures, typically based on something roughly real, so this one's a bit like an armadillo, but very creative. And to be honest, our original idea was, wouldn't it be great if we could take over some space in the art studio and buy loads of materials? And for various reasons, we didn't go with that. Not least, we don't want to deter students who don't feel very creative, and that is a big part of this, to say the output is what we're interested in, and what we're really proposing here is just a way of getting there. And there'll be a few students who might just draw something out and just draw a picture, and others who really, really go for it. I mean, this is probably I think this has got the most hours put into it. This is a student who's made something out of papier-mâché, built the design, put the papier-mâché on, waited for it to set, put other layers on, then painted it. She really got into it. But we've got other students who make stuff out of junk modelling, and we set the project up like that. So in this session, by the end of the workshop, the students are going away with a whole load of plasticine. So they make a start, because we don't want them to feel that they've got to buy materials, but on the other hand, it's nice to help. So some of them do buy stuff, most of them don't, and the cost to the business school isn't too bad. So that's what alabrichis look like, and actually, if I can, these are the examples that my colleague and I made. So this is mine, because I'm really into languages, so it's pretty unimaginative. This was a baked bean can with papier-mâché over it, which is why it looks like a baked bean can. But I was trying to represent something about my linguistic kind of interests and capabilities, but also actually the eventual one has got arms, because I'm quite kind of friendly and very smiley and positive. So yeah, it was an early attempt. I definitely don't put this in front of the students as an A-grade exemplar. But really, we at this stage, when we first introduced it, we just wanted them to know that we were getting involved as well. And my colleague, Barry, there's a sting in the tail. There's something about tenacity with sticky feet. The two different coloured eyes, because she's worked across various disciplines. So we could at least show the students some examples. This film Coco, I don't know if any of you have got kids, but this was a relatively recent Pixar movie, and it's set in Latin America, and there's a scene which has alabrichi kind of floating around. So now I can show this to the students, and it's just another way of explaining the concept and why we're calling it this kind of alabrichi thing. So the students do this kind of process where we do all the input about employers, we run through the kind of who am I activity, they do the text to all activity, and then before we let them loose on actually kind of starting to think about what the thing might look like and start to divide up all the plasticine, we do this kind of design thing. And it's really, I think it's a really great thing to be doing at that point in the semester, because it's important for the course, But it's relatively low risk. It's very social, so the students are working in pairs and threes, kind of discussing their ideas and starting to sketch things out, thinking about what they might want to use to make their designs. These are some of the alebrijes that the students made last year, and I chose these ones just to demonstrate the variety. And this is really important when we introduce it to the students as well. So, you know, we're not saying it has to be one thing or another. It can be big, it can be small, it could just be a drawing if you want it to be, but you know, the more you engage with the creativity process, the further we think you get. So this student is Polish, hence the eagle. I forget what the dots represented, but the red and white was definitely from the Polish flag. This one's actually made out of a condom. Didn't realise when we gave that one an award that it was made out of a condom until the student came to class the following week with it, and as she handed it over, she said, "It's a condom." And it was slightly deflating at that point. So I thought, definitely marks for ingenuity. And in her statement, in her rationale, she said that she'd chosen a prophylactic to represent, I think it was reliability. And I kind of was thinking afterwards, I'm sure there are other ways to represent reliability, but you know, well done her. So it's actually quite a neat example of start with what you want to represent, work out what makes sense to you, explain it in the interpretive text, and then we're good to go. And she's got countries on there because she likes to travel, and I think her friends always say that she's a cheeky monkey and she likes playing football. This one, I can't bring this as an example because it was about this big. This is all made out of origami. There are about 200 elements to that, so again, it doesn't travel well. They're all individually folded triangles. I love Alice's thing, basically because she loves chocolate, which isn't maybe what we'd really want her to be pushing to an employer in terms of her attributes. But it gave her the hook for her whole design, you know, and so that was quite neat. And of course, junk modelling is something I really want to push with the students because it's easy to find the materials. And then this kind of thing, you know, really, really abstract. Dave made this. There's a whole rationale for the design in terms of its simplicity. This is about his kind of being ambitious, but solid, you know, and I think he was trying to say that he felt kind of almost like a blank slate in terms of, you know, he's open to opportunities, whereas other students go for something that's got a lot more kind of detail to it. In fact, Dave's little orange fellow is here. There he is, he's fallen over. So there we are. So I brought my examples. These live in my office. I've got a dreadful reputation. Just so you can have a look. And the one in the middle is actually made out of a tennis ball because the student likes playing tennis. So that was her kind of start point, and then went on from there. And not all of them, but some of them have hooked into this idea of the combined honours identity. So this one's got two different coloured eyebrows to represent the two disciplines, which is quite nice. So we give out prizes the following week. So the final session is really the kind of wrap-up of the semester, briefing them for semester 2 because it's a year-long module. And then, because basically it's the last class before Christmas, we give out these certificates and they all get like a small box of chocolates or something. And we do have criteria that we kind of state right from the get-go in terms of what we're looking for in the personal statements. So we would either recognise students for their kind of artistic endeavours in terms of how they've designed their alebrije, but also how they've written their interpretive text. We tend to highlight persuasiveness because, you know, this is about communication. And, you know, when you boil it down to your personal brand statement, it's not about how super duper you are, it's about how persuasively and how clearly you can communicate that to employers. This is one that really went for the disciplinary difference bit with the two-headed creature. So we don't actually get too many two-headed creatures. You think we get a lot, given that they're all on combined honours. We tend to get a lot of dolphins because I'm friendly, or dogs. Lots of octopi because students feel that's a good way to represent multitasking. And then we sometimes get creatures which are representative of where the students come from, like the Polish eagle. So here's what the students said when we asked them at the end of that semester, so December last year, what they liked about the module. Fun, got them thinking more clearly about employability skills, which is great, because the fun bit I think is important. It can't all be, you know, just like slogging towards assignments. And we definitely wanted to pitch it as important but enjoyable. They're thinking more clearly about employability skills in bingo. Practical activity worked better for me as I was more engaged. Loved the alebrije task, it was very creative. Great way for me to get me to think about my attributes. what we see with the output that we get is definitely a world away from what we used to get when we just used to run this as a seminar activity, ask the students to kind of write a kind of brief statement about themselves, and it was all pretty cliched and relatively kind of generic. It's fair to say that some students were not very happy. So when I asked students what they preferred to change about the module, we had at least 3 who identified this very project. Because we also do an activity where we use Lego bricks to demonstrate the principles of operations management. So again, it's a great way to engage with that thing rather than just talking about it, but some students say this is a bit juvenile. We played with Lego and Play-Doh for £9,000 a year. Quote, I wish I knew who that student was because I'd really like to explain. I'd rather have the extra time off to prepare for exams. So part of this, I think, is about students understanding why we're taking maybe a slightly more left field approach to where we want to get to, and maybe it doesn't feel like serious university work. But I think part of it is the extent to which they're ready to engage with the employability agenda, because you guys all know we've got students who arrive at university and they've already got their 5-year plan and they're pretty sure they want to work in whatever marketing, and off we go, and they're very organised and quite emotionally mature, and others who really won't start thinking about anything along the kind of employability kind of scale or anything to do with employability or graduate schemes until after they've graduated. So our challenge, I think, is to tackle both of those things, and we do. So now that we've run it a second time, the second time around briefing was addressing some of these kind of feelings that we know that some of you are going to feel this, that or the other, and so really trying to kind of engage them and have them trust its usefulness. Overall, when I went through the open comments, and this is a module of about 120 students last year, we had 12 positive and 9 negative. So overall, I think I can justify carrying on with it just for now. So the staff that were involved in running it, because I have a team, last year I had a team of myself and 2 tutors, so I asked them for how they felt. We definitely felt very nervous the first time we did it because we had no idea how it was going to go down with the students. And we've always been really pleasantly surprised with how they engage with it and the level. Even if they don't want to engage with it very much, they kind of get involved. And it is a really nice social thing because it becomes something that they can, even as they're walking into a class, with whatever they've made with their artefact, they're kind of chatting about it, going, oh, what did you do, and all that kind of thing. One of the tutors said it allowed different students to shine, which I think is a really nice idea, that there are those students that dominate in a kind of traditional seminar discussion. They've read the stuff and then some, and they're very confident, and they sit at the front and they want to make lots of contributions. And if there are 20 students in the room, it's difficult to hear from everybody. So I thought that was really interesting, that we could see students who maybe don't tend to kind of push themselves forward in the kind of more traditional stuff we do in seminars, who felt that this was maybe their moment. Definitely obviously appeals to any students who've got any kind of creative flair, but this kind of early adopter process was also quite interesting. Even just within the classroom, you could see students kind of helping each other out and encouraging each other, which was really nice. We have this module that they do, and it's not, in the modular system you often have students where a module is compulsory for some and optional for others. This Intro to Business and Management module is only for the Business Management Combined students, but we also put them into seminar groups according to their second subject, so all your psychology students are all together in one seminar set. It means they have 2 levels of cohort identity. They identify as combined honours, and we can manage that process, but they also can see everyone else who shares their combination. And so this actually, this wasn't the plan, but it turned into another way to really kind of get that thing going, because obviously they're working together in seminars, they don't have any assessed group work in the first semester, but this was turned into a kind of informal group activity. I think a lot of them were working together in the week that they had to do the actual creative project. There was clearly some collaboration going on, which was really nice. And of course, different perspectives is really important, and variety. So however the students feel about it, we're really trying to encourage them to be okay with learning in lots of different ways. Just pushing their learning forward a bit. And we demonstrate that to them in terms of, encouraging them to kind of engage by showing them the kind of output that we've had from the previous cohort. There's plenty of literature on this, so I've got really into kind of reading about how creativity can kind of map into how we teach and how students learn. I really liked this one here from, Kleinman's written about this a lot, but you see it as a kind of transformation-focused experience, and that you stumble onto things, and that's absolutely the experience that we had in coming up with this. having gone to a workshop about an anthropology talk and then making the connection and suddenly realising that that could fit. And I've had conversations with colleagues who've come to see this talk at the BLT in the summer, who are all across the university, who are saying, oh, I wonder if that could work for music or other disciplines as well. There's a lot about the kind of barrier that a lot of us identify either as creative or not. And I think that was something that once I started reading some of the kind of literature on this, I thought that definitely is something that we need to be addressing when we talk to the students. And we kind of did that a bit when we first introduced the project, but I think because my colleague and I were so enthusiastic about it, we were trying to really encourage the creative side. As we've seen the output, when we ran it a second time, we were definitely a bit more, not quite muted, but understanding of all the different perspectives in the room. So we would address the fact that we know some of you might not feel very creative, but think about what creativity means, and we talk about that a bit. And that, you know, this is something everybody can get involved with. And once they could see examples from the previous, I mean, even when they just had my example to go on, I'm not very creative at all, they could kind of see that this isn't an art project. And we definitely had to badge it as something that was focused on employability. And the output was what they write. This is just a way to get there. I think, yeah, so I kind of, as I wanted to kind of finish by asking you how you think you would get on with this. And if you, I know everyone's kind of finished their lunches, but I was thinking as you kind of finish your lunch, you could think about if you were going to design an alabriki, what would it look like? What would it be based on? What values would you want to express? You know, do you have a creature in mind? Maybe you have, you know, there's an animal that you identify with. Are there colours that have particular meaning to you that you'd want to kind of bring in? So you can start with this process that the students go through in terms of the first part of the design, and then you could think about what your creature would look like. I think I've rattled through that. That's it. That's all I wanted to say. So I don't know if you want to have a go, or if there's any questions about how it's gone, or if you've got any thoughts. I'd love to hear your ideas, if there's any ways that you think I could make it better.
When did you say you did it? Was it end of the first?
End of the first semester.
End of the very first semester.
First semester of a year-long module.
Oh right, okay.
Because we have this, we've got 2 main written assignments, and only one of which comes in semester 1. So that's handed in week 10, at the beginning of the week, and then the module's on Thursdays. So it's just kind of filling that 2-week gap at the end.
Do you think that's, I mean, for you, do you think that's the optimum time?
Yeah. I feel bad, to be honest, I feel bad talking to first years about employability, because it feels a bit harsh. You know, when I was at uni, I didn't think about any of that stuff. But that's the reality, is that we do have this thread that we want to go through, and what we used to do previously was kind of wait until semester 2. We do a lot of management theory in semester 2, so it felt like it fitted better there. But it was much more focused on the kind of traditional how careers can support you type of input, and thinking about a skills audit and how they might head into the summer holiday and pick interesting summer jobs that could support the development of important skills. But it wasn't quite, you know, it's a very personal thing, and we do still talk about what employers are looking for, and that part of it is still there. But I think that's a bit kind of removed. And even a skills audit, which is obviously quite a personal thing, still just a bit black and white. So we still talk to them about the kind of career support aspect of things, but I think by focusing on personal branding, it's also just a bit more up to date, to be honest, because this is quite a current idea and relatively new. I think it's a bit more whizzy than just talking about careers in a more nebulous sense. Well, that's the idea, anyway.
No, I quite like it. I think it's very good. It gives you some sort of anchor as well, I think, for the future, so you can, by having something visualized that stays in your mind whenever you go in the future, you can expand on it.
It's not just another written assignment that you've done.
Yeah.
I mean, the personal brand statement is something like, 80 words or something, so it's tiny. And there is a danger that it would become just another thing that I wrote, especially because it's a course requirement, so it's not like you're working to an assignment where you're producing a 2,000-word report or something. I think it's definitely memorable. And I still know all the students that made these ones, and obviously we're now, they're now heading into their final year, some of them, and, I think that's quite nice, that because it's something that you kind of work on, notwithstanding the student who thought it was a waste of his time. Yeah.
I don't know if it's a psychologist in me, but I would be interested to. Have you ever thought about following up?
Yeah.
Doing it the third year again, see how these ideas are.
That's a really good
how
idea.
they progress over time.
That's a really good idea.
Because
Actually, I could do that because they. I mean, we now have this everything's online submission. So the idea of bringing your personal brand statement, the first 2 times we ran it was because we want to get them in the room. Because if it's just an online submission, they wouldn't turn up. So that's going to be my challenge in but actually it'll be week 11 and 12 this semester. But because they submit online and they put it all into one document, the picture, in fact most of them do all 3 things in one document, I've got that, so it'd be very easy to revisit it with the final years, and I could even just do it as an optional thing if they wanted to kind of come along and we could provide the materials, a bit like a social thing.
Because what I was thinking, like, because it sounds like a great idea, particularly for our first years, because psychology for us is a generic thing. They don't go in and go, I'm going to be unless they're very specifically going to be a clinical psychologist, which is or rarely the case. But it'd be quite nice to see how it changed over time, because what I thought I was going to be at the beginning of university didn't transpire.
Yeah, exactly. I quite like that idea of visit it. One of the other creative things I do is I have my strategy students write metaphors to explain how they feel about studying strategy. And I get things like it's like wading through tree colour, it's like building IKEA furniture without the instructions. But if I do it at the beginning of the semester and then I do it again at the end, even just in that kind of 10-week period, you've got a difference. Sometimes I still feel like they're wading through treacle, but I love the idea of revisiting in the final year. That's really neat, actually. We have another module that the business management students do. As it's quite unusual for combined honours to have a compulsory module in final year, but mine do, and it's a year-long double honours. And it's the first part of it is a big case study analysis, so it's really the kind of bringing together all the business management stuff that they've done. But the final task, which is 30% of the module, basically they focus on employability. They design assessment centre tasks, which they then run with the first years. So we've also got that connection back to the first year experience, and I wonder whether I could link it to that. Oh, that's great. Thank you very much. That's brilliant.
So you'd hope so at the end of 3 years, that it changed to some extent over the 3 years.
They wouldn't necessarily even have to redesign the thing. They might just revisit their personal brand statement. I could certainly order more plasticine. Turns out if you order it in bulk, it's not too expensive. Yeah.
Thank you very much. That was, I think the idea is lovely. Especially I'm Mexican, so.
Oh my goodness! I should have had you at the front. Explaining.
But I was wondering more about the challenges of the marking and how do you assess?
Well,
this?
so that's a bit smoke and mirrors, because the way the brief is written, the course requirement is their personal brand statement. The students infer from that the whole thing is a course requirement, but it isn't. So, because what we have done the last 2 years is to disaggregate the 2 parts, so they would take a photograph of their alabrihi and insert their interpretive text and upload that as one document into Moodle. And I just wanted to make sure that they'd done it, and then we would go through them when we would pick our prize winners, and we give out quite a lot of prizes. So that's one part of the process. So I would then be following up with students who hadn't put anything in for the course for that part of the project. But then the course requirement bit was bring your personal brand statement to class, and I would collect those in, and then anyone who hadn't done it, I would write to them and say, okay, because it's a course requirement, I can be flexible with the deadlines, can you bring it after Christmas, kind of thing. But because we've now got to have this entirely online submission, actually I've put the whole thing together, so now what the students are going to do is to submit one document with all 3 bits. So how they get there, although that's not a course requirement, it's still going to be kind of feel like it is. Because it's a course requirement, it's not graded. So I'm not saying this is an A grade or this is a C grade. I don't feel qualified to. I mean, we've got criteria which just to help them understand how it kind of hangs together. So the kind of things that we were highlighting in some of the feedback for the prizes, we've got criteria for what an interpretive text a good one would look like, and what we might be looking for in an alabrihi in terms of design and colour and attributes and everything. But really, it's about giving them some feedback. So I read through the personal brand statements over Christmas because I have no life, and just say, and I just gives them some positive feedback. So I'll comment on something that they've highlighted, or I might say, think about how you could focus more on your combined honours identity or something like that. So it's really an entirely formative exercise, which I think makes it okay, because I find it very difficult to have actual kind of marking criteria, even to say to a student, this is great, I mean, and this is less good. You know, even picking out the prize winners can be really tricky, because it's all about the engagement. So that's kind of where we pitch it, is to make sure the students understand what course requirement means. You've just got to engage and produce something that, you know, we can feel we're all happy with. And if you choose to just kind of do it very quickly and not really engage with it, then we know what the output will look like. And I think because the second time, we've only run it twice, but because the second time around we had examples, we could say, look, you know, here's what this student produced, and this was what their interpretive text looked like, and this is what they said in their personal brand statement, so they could kind of get an idea of where the benchmarks are. And we have those examples in the brief so they can see kind of roughly what they're doing. And you do get a lot of pretty kind of generic stuff. But I would say easily more than half of the students really kind of get into it, and they've really thought about what they want to communicate, and they have engaged with it. So for me, that's the bit that works. But yeah, we keep it pretty feedback focused, because beauty is in the eye of the beholder. So, you know, who am I to say that doesn't have meaning to you? I think all we could really assess, if we were going to assess anything, is the personal brand statement, because then we know the standard we're looking for. So that's where we focus our feedback. So it's a bit of work. Hello.
Would it perhaps help students if you allow them different methods of creating something? It doesn't need to be a physical creation. It could be, you mentioned avatar, for example, or it could be using software like Photoshop or whatever.
That's a good idea, yeah.
Because I wouldn't want to do something physical, but I would love to use Photoshop.
Yeah, that's a good point. So, the first two iterations we've tended to focus on other ways you can make something physical, but that's a really good point. Because they can really produce anything, as long as it has them engage with that thought process. I'd need to get some input on the technical side of all of that, but yeah, they undoubtedly know more about that than I do. So how easy is it to create an avatar?
There are free websites
Really?
where you can go and create whatever you like.
Oh, cool.
And there are also, I mean, this is mostly for children, but then the stuff
Yeah.
there is for children as well. And you can create fantasy animals and all sorts of things. I can send you links.
Could you? That'd be
Yeah.
really helpful. Yeah. Because, I mean, I guess one of the things that worries me about this is it might come off as a bit primary school. On the other hand, that's almost what I want to address, is that it's okay to engage in something that feels like the kind of thing you used to do when you were 7, because it's not about that. But I'm sure there'll be some students who feel much more adept in front of a screen. And as long as that, it'd be really interesting to assess whether that still gets them the same outcomes in terms of what they then produce and their insights into their personal brand. Anyone else got any ideas for me? Because this is all very, very useful.
Are you open to people stealing your ideas?
Oh, totally. Oh, my goodness, absolutely. And it's not really my idea. It was mainly Barry who came up with it. I was just the caffeine-fueled enthusiasm at the conference. And like, yeah, that'd be great. And I've jumped on top of it in terms of keeping it going, because it's now my module. She's not the co-module leader anymore. But yeah, totally. You know, I can send you all my stuff if you want. C. Jones at Brooks. Not the other Claire Jones, who is Claire Jones at Brooks. Half my emails go to somebody who works in biomedical sciences. C. Jones at Brooks. That'd be cool. Yeah, I can send you all the slides and stuff. Yeah, wicked. Okay, well, listen, thanks very much, guys. It was really nice to meet you. I was really pleased, actually, delighted to be invited to do this. I'm sorry I've been rattling on because I'm between meetings, so my head's like, oh. But it's been really great to get your ideas, my goodness. I need to quickly go away and write them down.
Cool.
Thanks very much.
Thank you.